Agustín, 6 years ago, you started your cash game journey all the way down at 5 NL, steadily improving and moving up one stake at a time. Fast forward to today, and you're playing 40k NL games, which are literally like the biggest games that currently run online. You mentioned that reaching those stakes, and more importantly, how you managed to perform in them, is one of the proudest moments of your career. Why does that moment stand out so much to you, and what do you remember most about, the first time that you played 40k NL?
Okay, yeah, so basically it was mostly about it being an iconic moment. Like back in the days, the highest stakes possible in PokerStars used to be 40k NL, and I remember like watching some old videos about those games. And yeah, basically once this opportunity came into reality, and having had played that big long session at 40k NL, it felt like really fulfilling for me. Felt like a true accomplishment to having able to play that game.
It can often be very, very difficult, right, to perform well when you're taking a shot for the first time, right, especially at such huge stakes. What enables you to keep your composure even though stakes and pressure are now increased, right? Because you said in your experience, right, that you played 8 hours straight in your first 40k NL session, but you were very composed.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a crazy session because it was, I never play 8 hour sessions. I usually play like an hour and a half, 2 hours, max 3 hours if the games are really good. But yeah, in this particular moment, the spot came, and I really had to be ready and to stay composed to play that game. And yeah, basically I just felt like if the opportunity is there, I have to take advantage of it. Once you're in the game with the adrenaline rushing on you, I kind of felt okay. It was like really, really fun, a really fun experience. So yeah, it's not the normal amount of hours I grind, but I'm happy to have done it, and it felt really good.
When you say it was such a good opportunity, what are like the criteria for you to enter something and to label something as a good opportunity?
Yeah, so basically at 40k NL, there's almost never games running with a recreational or without recreationals. That's just a stake that doesn't really run. So there's a recreational that had been playing lower stakes and sometimes was moving up to 20k. And this day he decided to move up to 40k. And yeah, I was already ready for taking the seat. I had the table open, and I had already arranged with some of my mates that have some of my action, because obviously I'm not playing all of myself on those games. And yeah, decided it was a good spot. Like obviously the recreational was quite big. I felt quite comfortable with taking the shot, and whatever happened.
In terms of like performing and making shots stick throughout your career, have you ever had any difficulty when you took a shot to bring like the same level of kind of reach like your A game in shots that you take?
Yeah, so I never had any like brutal sessions where I lost huge part of my bankroll in just one session because of I was taking a shot at a higher stake. But all along my career, every stake I moved up, I faced some like difficulties, and I had almost every stake I moved up, even at micro stakes. I moved up for a bit, then almost always had to move down again for some time. Maybe 1 or 2 times I didn't have to, but most of the time it's part of the game, it's part of the journey. And yeah, especially if you're shot taking aggressively, then you have to be ready. It's one of the most important things as a professional, to know your limits and know when you have to move down and have specific rules about it.
When you say specific rules about it, can you maybe share a little bit what goes into, taking a calculated shot and moving down responsibly?
Well, I've never had like, I was always like kind of aggressive on that, especially when I was at lower stakes. It goes with the confidence you have at the moment also, because I always thought at the smaller stakes, when I was playing the smaller stakes, I already had some experience. I used to play different formats before. So I decided to start at 5NL, but just because I was being cautious, but I had some knowledge and felt quite comfortable up until maybe 200NL. But then I also started getting coaching and most of the time, whenever I took a shot at the next level, I was quite comfortable that I was gonna beat those games. I never jumped into the water without like being sure what's going on. I try to take quite calculated risk and just get in the game when I feel I'm actually a pretty big winner at those games. I'm not aiming ever at playing 1 or 2 games. I don't think it's a great idea. So when I started playing, yeah, I remember maybe when I was moving up to 100L, 200L, maybe my rule was 30 buy-ins, but I'm not pretty sure. When you're getting to higher stakes, I think you have to be a bit more careful, but at the same time, when you move up a stake or you start playing 10k NL, 20k NL, or 5k NL, those games don't run constantly, and you don't move completely to that stake. So when you start playing some 5ks, you just have to wait for a game to start. There's not 5k games running all the time. So it's fine to take the spot, and you don't necessarily need X amount of buy-ins for that game, because it's not going to be your normal game. It's just going to be the shot one table at your session.
Looking back, you mentioned that it's very rare that the first shot just immediately succeeded. Do you think like shots in general players fail at because of technical mistakes, or because they're unable to perform consistently due to the extra added pressure of like the highest stake?
Well, I wouldn't be sure to say like it's definitely this thing. It's very different for many people, but I think one of the biggest aspects is the not being ready mentally. Like whenever you move up a stake, it can feel tough at the first times. Whenever you're all in for the first time in the new stake, your heart starts pumping a bit faster, and you do get nervous. And I felt that all the way moving up every stake. Yeah, I just feel the most important part to move up a stake is to actually be decent enough, have proved results in the lower stakes, and go with the best attitude. Be ready to lose and be fine with it, and go back to your previous stake.
Was this something that you had to learn, or did this come very natural to you?
Yeah, I feel like whenever all the way since I started, I always had like a very professional mindset about it. Like one of the first things I learned about poker was that you didn't control the results in the short term, and I was always ready to, expecting things not to go well in the first time. I experience a lot with a variance calculator, for example. I always love to do that whenever I'm on a downswing or feeling a bit down, and I feel like you have to be conscious about it. And somehow I was quite prepared ever since I started about that aspect of the game. I don't know. I used to watch some streamers, and maybe one of them maybe was pointing it out a lot and making sure like people understood how it worked. But yeah, I feel like it comes mostly with my kind of personality, that kind of aspect.
You've been mainly playing like 2KNL Plus for the last few years, and like I said, now you find yourself in the biggest games available online. Could you maybe just give us some insight in what the online high stakes cash game ecosystem looks like nowadays?
Okay, yeah, so mostly it's about a few sites that have high stakes running. On GG Poker, you can play up to 2K, which is pretty good, and it's hard to get to be playing only higher stakes than 2K. So 2K is usually the main stake of many of the players that play 2K plus. If you want to play 5K only, 5K, 10K, you will be reg battling a lot. That's there's no choice on that. You cannot find, at least on European sites, you can't find enough games at 5K to just grind and get your win rate and guarantee like good games. You will have to battle with some of the best players of the world in the most competitive games, mostly on WPN, now Coin Poker, some random game that pops up on maybe Stars, but it's almost completely dead. But yeah, if you really want to play like only high stakes, your way to go is going to be to rake battle and to battle the best guys 300, 400 heads up. But yeah, that's not what I usually do. I mostly take good spots, try to find the best games. Rarely play only with regs. Maybe when I have a few tables, or some of the regs I think are not good enough, and I could get an edge. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like your criteria of a good game that also kind of evolves, right? As you evolve as a player, like you said, maybe sometimes a table can be a rec lineup, but there's people know that some of them they label basically a rec as a fish, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then you could say I'm playing a rec lineup, but yeah, that to you from the outside maybe it's a rec lineup, but for me this guy's a fish.
Yeah, sure, but it's never gonna be a huge edge you can have on some of these guys. Like, yeah, you could get some edges. There's a lot of stuff still. Like, players are not perfect at all, and they do have a lot of leaks and mistakes on their games. And if you pay attention to a lot of things, then you can definitely take an edge off them. And also, recreationals that happen to be at 5k, 10k don't always have insane loss rates. So you do start taking some spots that are with like some semi-recreationals, but you just have to calculate that aspect into it and try to analyze how good of a game it is, and if you're willing to play on a game that maybe you're a 1 or 2 BB winner. Because I feel like whenever these reg battles are going on, well, surely someone is losing a bit, but the winners are probably like 1, 2 BB. Not everyone is Davy Jones that can reg battle for years and get 5 or 7 BBs per 100. Most of these guys are like 1 BB, 0.5 BB, or actually losing. So I think you have to take into consideration that if you're willing to take that risk and spend like 1 million hands break even at those stakes, then sure, go ahead. But I try to avoid those spots whenever I think the edges are so slim.
Have you always been so aware of kind of what your win rate is and what your edge is? You already mentioned like playing around with the variance calculator already since the beginning to kind of align expectations. Is this like awareness of the edge in the games and the fact that we have to that you simply make more money if you find good games? Is that something that's always been there, or have you also kind of bumped your head into the wall in games that were basically unbeatable?
Yeah, I feel like ever since I started with my first coach, I first got coached by an Argentinian player, Juani Repeto. His star's nickname was Strauss J. He was the first guy to tell me, like, okay, sure, you play this 600 game, but there needs to be a recreational for you to win. The rake that the site is taking is a lot. Like, when you put it into numbers and you realize how big of a recreational there has to be on the table for you to just to be break even, you realize that a lot of people are just wasting their time or not paying enough attention. So that I feel like that was the first time when I was playing cash games and realized how important that was. And then later in my career I also got coached by, I got into BitB, but surely we'll get into that afterwards. And we had some big talks about it, like how it impacts the win race, how big the fish has to be, depending on the rake, depending on the position on the table. Yes, there's quite a lot of aspects on it, and I've always been quite aware of that because I think it matters quite a lot.
You think a lot of players, I agree with you. I think there's plenty of players that simply playing games that, they're simply not beating. Do you think they just don't know the numbers, they haven't seen the numbers, or do you think they just think that they're better than that, that they're actually beat the game for more than they're actually beating it?
Yeah, there's definitely guys that wouldn't have an idea like what the rake is. They just think, okay, if people are playing, it's fine, I'll play. It's just a game, I'll play poker. I like to play poker and see what happens. There's definitely people that are like that. And obviously there's also players that think their edge is much bigger than it is, for sure. that's part of that's the game basically. That's the nice parts of the game also. People thinking they're actually better than they are. That happens with everyone. Almost everyone thinks they are actually better than they are, because it's the nice thing about the game is that it's so easy to learn the game, to know how to play, and to feel smart about like a small thing you realize and you feel smart about it, and just say, okay, I'm sure this is my edge, or the people aren't realizing what's going on here, when it's actually like edges can be small if you don't have an actual understanding of what's going on. And yeah, at high stakes, there's some very good players that know what's going on, but there's still players that you can get edges on.
It's like, are like the high stakes games, you mentioned, there's always, established names betting out, or we're still talking about like the same names that have been there for years and years, or do you see like a steady flow of new guys coming into the pool?
Well, most of the pool remains the same. There's not that many guys coming up out of nowhere. Maybe on ACR, for example, WPN, you get some people with new nicknames, which you are not sure if they're known or whatever, because they allow to change skins, and yeah, you're not sure where they came from, but it's mostly the same guys. But yeah, for sure, some guys pop up every year, but it's quite a limited pool at those games, for sure.
How would you describe the current high stakes meta in online cash games?
In terms of like strategy, yeah, I wouldn't be really able to tell. I try to be really focused on each individual player, and I'm not the type to have a strategy depending on what the meta is, but actually trying to pay attention to what each guy is doing and try to analyze their game. But yeah, basically the guys with 45 wounds of flop are not there anymore, and the guys that are like crazy redliners 53 wounds of flop also not there. The range of players that play those games gets a lot more limited, but there's still a lot of room for many different player types. You can still see players super theory oriented, not caring about the other player's game and just trying to play the solver. You get some of the kind of more Spanish crew, which are more paying attention to the hats or to the stats on the players, or doing some different moves, different open raise sizings, different not approved or not theory approved sizings pre-flop or post-flop, making it up in the moment. There's still a lot of room for different player types, I think.
What do you think separates, like, let's say it like the 10k plus games from like the lower but still high stakes games, let's say like 1 to 5k now? What do you think sets those games apart?
Well, I don't think there's a huge difference on the players on the edge. There's actually a few players that play 10k or 20k that are actually have a lot less skill at those stakes, but they're maybe old school players. They do have the bankroll to play. They're mostly just bum hunting those games, not caring too much about playing lower, but you can tell there's a lot of leaks in their game. And the 1k to 5k, well, maybe 1k, 2k, there are players that, yeah, I feel like wouldn't be able to beat the higher stakes, but it's mostly about being able to just mentally be prepared and be ready to face the challenges of having the swings, and being ready to, like, yeah, maybe lose. If you're a 1k player, losing 3 binds at 10k or 3 binds at 20k can really hurt you, can maybe make your month miserable and make you feel like, yeah, you don't want to play anymore. So it's a good decision for some people to just stay away from those, because they do run very rarely, and you have to be ready to, like, take the results or wherever it comes, and it could be mentally very hard. I think that's the main difference between the players being willing to play the higher stakes and the players that just stay at 1k or 2k.
You mentioned like that it's probably often a good idea, right? That they don't want to take the shot, but apparently it was not a good idea for you because you did the shot. Why did you?
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I just can't see a game that's actually good, and I can see my edge, and I can see I could have a good win rate, and the EV is there, and I'm not really able to just let it go. Of course, I do have limits, and I have had limits whenever I was moving up. At some point, I was just I'm playing just max 500 or max 1k, but at some point you realize that the bankroll keeps growing, and you feel like you could play any kind of game. Obviously, selling action if you need to. If you always have to be responsible about not taking a huge risk that could ruin your bankroll. But I don't know. I just felt like it's part of my progression as a player to play the higher stakes games. I always felt like I could keep going, and that's just how it went. Obviously, I wasn't always super sure about it. I thought a lot if it was worth taking the risk, and I still do sometimes when I feel down, because it does happen when you have a couple bad sessions in a row or a couple months where your high stakes results determine your results, and it makes your graph look awful in money terms. But always come back to just rationalizing it, thinking about the long term. It's good to just stay aware of it, but focus on the long term, and just your poker career is just one long graph. And if you take good spots all the time, and you have the level and the skill to hold yourself on those games, in the end it's gonna go well. You can take your foot off the pedal whenever you are feeling too overwhelmed on it. It does come with a lot of stress, of course. That's why I say it does make sense for a lot of people, and even for me it could make sense to be more chill and stay at the lower stakes, where you can grind hundreds of thousands of hands every year with no variance, or a lot less variance. But I like the challenge of being there, and I just kind of pass on the spots that I feel like there's so much EV to be had.
Well, obviously, reaching high stakes by itself is very impressive, right? Most players don't really make it all the way to the high stakes. But what stands out even more to me in your story is how quickly and consistent you got there, because it took you roughly 3 to 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, to go from 5NL to taking shots as 5KNL, which is significantly faster than like most successful players that we've had on this podcast, for example. When you look back at the climb, what do you think has been the biggest contributor to such a fast and steady rise to high stakes?
I think it obviously takes, first of all, it takes obsession with the game, and being day in, day out, looking at hands, talking hands with friends, grinding your hours. But I feel like, that's a common point that every player that moves up stakes quite fast has, and it's like a precondition. But I guess one of my strengths on it is always analyzing where my edge comes from, and what games I should be playing and which I shouldn't. And I do spend and have spent a lot of time thinking about that and calculating the risk and the reward on which games I should be playing. And basically it. I did move quite fast on cash games, but I did have some experience from the past. Like from 2015 to 2019, I was starting to play poker just all over the place, playing different formats, always kind of taking it professionally, but never super into one thing. I was just grinding some spin-and-gos, or the next day I would play some MTTs. I was quite obsessed with watching some streamers. My favorite one was Jason Somerville. Like, he was streaming, I don't know, in those 2016, 2017 maybe. He even got me into mixed games. I spent some time playing mixed games on PokerStars. I really loved that one. Spent like 6 months being a professional at 6 max hyper turbo sit-and-gos. And spent like 3-4 years playing a lot of different formats. Also like trying to satellite into some live MTTs and going to live MTTs. Just that kind of semi-professional, recreational kind of way to get involved with poker. But at some point I decided yeah, it's time to start from scratch and decide actually which format I should specialize on. Basically the decision was in between cash games and MTTs. But yeah, that's just to say that my progression on cash games was quite fast, but I did have kind of a way to think about poker, not super specific and not very well developed, but I had spent some time playing and yeah, I had some background.
How much do you think your ability to perform under pressure has helped you move up stakes? You mentioned there kind of the risk to reward ratio, putting yourself in good games, but you also mentioned as you were speaking earlier, the heart rate increases, you feel a bit of adrenaline. I think for a lot of players, shot taking on new levels, not just the money value, but you just feel different. There's now a lot more expectations, a lot more pressure. It feels like you're someone who can manage that well. How do you shoot shot take, and how do you keep in control and play your best game when you're playing bigger games than usual?
Well, I think it's mostly about how my personality is, just being quite calm, thinking through my decisions on which games I should be in and decisions in-game also. I feel like that's probably my biggest strength that made me have this kind of smooth progression and not feeling too overwhelmed on it. Of course, I did have a lot of moments or months where I was feeling quite stressed. It's definitely something I still work on today. But yeah, I'm not sure about specifics, but I feel like it's one of my personality traits that made me be quite disciplined and keep moving up whenever I was ready for it.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier being very accepting and not care about results you don't control. It feels like for you spend a lot of time pre-deciding what games to play, which games are good, and then from that you kind of, what happens, I think you said earlier as well, and you're okay with that. When things don't go well, you mentioned like each level you have shot took, you have had some setbacks. How do you generally deal with that? Are you someone who goes in the lab, studies more? Do you stick to the plan and get your volume in? What do you do when you face some adversity at a new level?
So yeah, when I'm feeling actually like really bad about having a long downswing or feeling like nothing's going my way, my main tool to get back to line and to feel more secure about myself and my game is to just look at my long-term graph. It's just kind of a therapy that I do when I'm not feeling confident about my game or about that. I just go on my tracker, look at my long-term results, realize how ridiculous it is to think that I'm not a winner, given my track record, and also spent countless hours on the variance calculator. And yeah, just trying to rationalize how these things do happen and it's part of the game. And whoever can manage it the best way is gonna be successful. Obviously, that's just one aspect of the game, but I do feel it's one that gets neglected by a lot of players, and maybe that's one that sets them back for a long time or doesn't let them grow or move up or realize what actually can happen. That's mainly what I do whenever I'm feeling down on or have to move back on stakes.
Let me tell you about Hand to Note, one of my favorite tools I use to improve as a poker player. What do all our guests have in common? They are deliberate in how they improve. While most of you guys are discussing hands with friends, watching videos, or looking up a spot here and there, it's clear that the top pros build structured systems and use the right tools to actually get better. One of these tools is Hand to Note. Hand to Note tracks every hand I play. I mark spots in game that I'm unsure about or found interesting, which helps me let go of what just happened and stay fully focused on the current hand I'm dealt, knowing that all hands I played are stored and ready to review when my session is over. Because just like in sports, the next game starts when this one ends. After I perform my session, I go in review mode. I go over my marked hands, the biggest spots I've played, and filter for specific spots I'm currently focused on. Session after session, I build a database of my game, and over time, my tendencies and biggest leaks start to show. This information allows me to direct all my studying to what is most important. With that clarity alone, you can cut your journey to the top in half. But it's not just your own game, because hand-to-note tracks those of your opponents too. Every action they take is stored and ready to be analyzed, ready to be exploited. And as the legendary Sun Tzu said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Clarity is power. Hand-to-note gives you that clarity. So if you want to become more deliberate in how you improve as well and start exploiting your opponents at a higher level, check out hand-to-note via the link in the description down below to start your 14-day free trial and use code MECHANICS to get 10% off your first purchase.
You mentioned that playing high stakes also comes with extra stress, and that it would be much more stress-free to play mid-stakes or slightly lower and not have the high variance or the high stress of playing the higher games. But you've never really went for that path. You've always pushed higher, and it feels like being quite aggressive with your bankroll. What drives that? Does that something that's been motivating you from the start of your career? You've always been motivated to shoot higher, or what kind of fuels you to want to keep putting yourself in high-stress environments to maximize edge?
Yeah, well, I can think of two main things that come to my mind about why I kept pushing and I didn't just stay on the kind of easier path of staying at a certain mid stakes or high stakes, but just capped at 2K maybe. The main thing is that I've always been super competitive, and yeah, ever since I was a child, every sport, every game that I would play with friends or with whoever, I was always super competitive, and I really wanted to win whatever I would do. And that didn't stop with poker, obviously. I just feel the urge to keep moving and to keep pushing myself to prove how good I can actually be, and to put me to the test. I feel like that kind of comes with a competitive aspect. But also, I can think about a big contributor to this thing is being surrounded by so many players that keep going and have played the higher stakes possible. Just getting into BTB, which is one of the best communities that you could get in, and where the higher stakes players and some of the best players are coaches, or just now some are semi-retired but used to be coaches when I was starting. They were always the guys that played the higher stakes, and I became quite good friends with a lot of them. And then I also became really good friends with Mateo Shilai, who has even like 3x my way of thinking about just competition, go move up, play the higher stakes possible. So it kind of felt natural to keep the track of my group, of some of my friends. Doesn't mean that everyone that comes into it decides to go that route, but I feel like for me, I became quite close with a lot of them, and I just probably felt like, why not? Why couldn't I be one of them and be right there? It's not like I've been playing so much high stakes. I still play a lot of 2K and 1K, even when there's not much volume. But yeah, just being willing to put myself on those games, I feel like comes a lot with the context and looking around myself and looking at players that just decide to be at those stakes.
You mentioned there the competition. You've always had that competitive drive in you. You mentioned being around other people kind of sparking you to want to push further. I'm curious to know for you about like belief in yourself. When did it click for you when you thought, actually, I can make it? Because I feel like a lot of players, they have that competitive drive. They have that kind of desire to want to push themselves. But at some point, they're like, I'm not sure if I can do it. I'm not sure if I can get to those higher levels. It feels like for you, the environment you were in might have helped with this. But when was the moment for you really started to believe in yourself that you could actually play the highest games?
I feel like it's been a part of me for forever, being quite self-confident that I can do something right and I can be good at something. Whenever I would play any kind of game, any kind of sports, I would always try hard to be good and feel like I can beat everyone and feel like I can be good. So I feel like with poker it came quite naturally in the same way.
Do you know where that comes from? Do you know what like childhood experiences growing up where you've gained that self-confidence? I think a lot of us struggle with believing in ourselves, especially in something new, a new domain. It's always hard without evidence to really believe in yourself. It feels like for you, you've had that kind of self-confidence. Is that built from some prior experiences?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but there could be a reason, but I'm not certain that it is this way. But I have an older brother, and it's quite natural for the younger brother to like have to be at the same level or try to beat your older brother to be better than him or whatever. Maybe that's one aspect that made me that way since I was a kid. I'm not entirely sure, but it could be a contributor for sure.
I can relate to that. I've got a brother who's 1 year older, and competition and trying to beat your brother is built into your everyday fabric. So you very quickly start to try to improve yourself so you can beat your brother basically at life, and that creates a path of self-growth. You mentioned being very professional and consistent is one of the key factors to your growth and progression. This sounds simple, but most poker players don't have a professional approach. They actually struggle to show up in ways that are in line with their goals going forwards. So I'm curious now for you, what does your daily routines, practices look like, and how has that evolved over the years? How do you approach poker, a typical day, typical week from a professional lens?
My day usually looks like studying in the morning. I wake up, have breakfast, study for 1 or 2 hours. Not every day, but almost every day. That's the normal day. Then usually go to the gym, do some sports, have lunch, and in the afternoon I start grinding. And I'm not crazy about grinding too many hours or studying too many hours either, but I feel like I'm quite consistent on it. For a long time, for the first, I don't know, 3-4 years, I wouldn't even stop to take Sundays off or any days off. I was just playing every day, almost every day. Never for more than 8 hours, never crazy hours, but always consistent with my 2, 3, 4 hours. 3 or 4 hours is the most common amounts that I would play on a day. And yeah, with the years, I realized that it's really important to have a day off. And for the last maybe 2 years, I started taking Sundays off too. But yeah, it's mostly about that. In Argentina, the games start to pick up at 3, 4 p.m., like the European afternoon or evening. So that's usually the best time to start. And usually play a couple hours, 2 or 3 sessions, and that's it. Never going too crazy, or just on very special occasions, but mostly being quite consistent.
Is there anything you do in your days that would be different to what many other players might do? Let's say I followed you around for a month, or an aspiring pro did. Anything you would do doing different that maybe you haven't thought of that is out of the box, but is a bit of a habit or routine of yours?
Not really. I actually have tried with meditation. I go on and off on doing meditations. I set myself goals many times. I find that to be very, very useful for me. Setting monthly goals, for example, on different things I want to work on, and habits and things I want to keep on my routine. But nowadays, I don't feel like anything is too out of the box. Maybe some good habits that I managed to keep on track is having my phone outside my room, never going to my room with my phone, going to sleep without it, trying to disconnect from getting the notifications all the time whenever I can. That's a constant struggle that I have on a daily basis. Addiction to the phone, or just scrolling too much or whatever. So that's the main thing. I usually have to set myself some specific goals so that I don't fall into. But the phone not on my room rule has been there for a lot of years, and I'm quite happy with that. I feel like sleeping is maybe top 3 priorities, probably top 1 priorities in anyone's life, but in a poker player's life also for sure. Like it makes a huge difference on a day that I slept well, my 8 or 9 hours, and whenever I just spent the night doing something else, or just not staying disciplined with my sleep routine and sleeping even 6 hours or 7 hours, which is normal for some people, but for me, I can really notice the difference. So just trying to be consistent with my routine and not doing really anything too crazy, but having some good habits to stay on track.
Some very good habits there. And we can vouch for the no phone rule. Just before we started the podcast, you left the room to put your phone in a different room. So
Yeah.
you're practicing what you preach there. And yeah, it seems like for you, it's more of a consistent approach rather than like big efforts that kind of aren't sustainable. You're much more, not slow and steady, but in terms of consistency, doing the things that really align with performance on a regular basis rather than having monumental things that you do every now and again. Do you ever fall off routine? I know it's good to have like a kind of real nice structure. Myself, I'm the same as you. I have a very structured day, but I always speak to people who struggle with like going off routine and then getting back onto routine. For yourself, maybe traveling or other times, do you ever find yourself off the routine that you want to be on? And if you do, how do you get back to your kind of simple professional structure?
Yeah, whenever I don't set proper goals on a month, I start to sleep on some different goals or different habits that make me fall apart on my good grinding routine or routine in general. But lately, yeah, I'm not being too rigorous on my goals too much lately, which maybe I should come back to it. I feel like having a couple things in line makes my routine go well, and it's also a lot about staying motivated with poker, because I feel like that's also a big aspect about why I have consistently gone up in stakes or have decent results. It's about finding ways or things in poker that make me wanna keep grinding, understanding new concepts. That's where being in a group like BitB helps me a lot, because we have some great coaches coming with different topics, different ideas, which tickle my mind and make me like be curious about the game almost every week on different ways. And yeah, that makes me stay consistent and stay motivated on the grind. But yeah, of course, I do have times where I feel like some burnout. For sure, I have had a lot of periods where I feel like I have to stop to get off the routine. And yeah, I sometimes take a week off. I have taken a couple of weeks off throughout the last years. Maybe go surfing. I have discovered surfing in the last 2.5 years on a trip I did with some poker friends. We went surfing for the first time and I fell in love with it. And yeah, the last couple of years, I had a couple like moments where I really felt like I had to take a break from grinding or from my routine. And yeah, just took a week to go to Nicaragua, for example, and surf for a week, then regain motivation, realize what I was struggling on, or which things I could improve to get back stronger.
I like that. It feels like for you, like realigning goals, having that life balance and keep coming back to what's purposeful for you is really important. I feel like some people can get kind of stuck on one goal, making money or trying to get to a certain stake, and that becomes like the fuel for a long periods. But as you have more success and you're achieving goals, you're kind of at the point you probably dreamed of being 2-3 years ago. You've really got to reconnect with new goals. What keeps me driven? What keeps me motivated? It used to be money. It used to be playing high stakes. Now I've got money. Now I'm playing high stakes. How do I keep aligning my goals with pushing forward and moving forward? It sounds like for you, keep realigning with new goals, being curious, learning, improving, finding ways to level up is a big part of that. In terms of like personal development, it seems like you're someone who works himself. Have you always been like that, or is poker been a bit of a necessity that's driven you to go deeper, to work on yourself?
I've been like this for quite a long time. Like, I remember when I was 13 or 14, I was already like thinking on ways to make money, and studying stuff about like stocks, for example, or like I remember with 14, spending a lot of time in some forums about investing, and always had that kind of mindset. I remember when I was also even maybe younger, like 12, my dad used to go work for some period of time from Monday to Friday to Chile, because he had to develop a project over there in the company he was working for. And I would have kind of a business idea where I would buy some laptop or DVD player or I don't know, any kind of electronics that in Argentina were very expensive, but in Chile there were normal international prices. And I would post on some webs where you can sell used or new stuff, and make some money of it, like publish what I wanted to sell, where I saw an opportunity, where I saw the EV of a specific product that was being sold super cheap in Chile, and in Argentina it was a lot more expensive. Putting a good price on it, getting it sold, and then getting my dad to buy it in Chile and come back to Argentina and just giving it to the buyer. I was doing that with like 12, 13 years already. So that kind of EV hunting, maybe you could say, or looking for opportunities in this sense, was a part of me since I was quite young. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that kind of risk to rewards calculation you're always making, and yeah, trying to seek opportunities has always been in your DNA. What led you to poker? What made you align that kind of the EV of going forward is going to be with this poker path? How did that come into your life?
Well, it just, when I was, also 13 or 14, we discovered Singa Poker on Facebook with some of my friends at the time. And yeah, just started playing for play money and discovered how the game worked. And then we started playing some home games, some Saturday nights where we played like a small MTT for 10 pesos each, with maybe was 50 cents or $1. 10, 12 people, we would play 2 tables, then get elimination, just like a tournament. And always felt quite intrigued about the game. That's kind of a normal thing for that age. Whenever you like games a lot, I always really love playing any kind of games, especially like card games or board games. And poker felt really cool, really interesting strategically, and it had the aspect about that you could make money. At that point, I didn't really realize that you could be a professional, of course. It felt like just kind of a movie thing, or people that were on ESPN playing the main event final table or whatever. But that was when I discovered it. Then for some time I didn't really pay attention to it or play. We stopped getting together to play the home game, and I just fell back in love with it when I was 17 or 18. When I discovered some poker streamers or YouTube videos, and that's when I started getting obsessed with it, and that started my journey.
Alongside this obsession phase, you were also at university, I believe, studying economics, which in your country is a 5-year degree. And there come a tipping point where you had to kind of decide which direction to go. And it feels like this must have been a tough moment for you, because it feels like your parents wanted you to continue your education, but you were starting to get that addiction to poker a bit strongly. So maybe talk us through that kind of period where you decided to go all in on poker, to go off the traditional path, and maybe the challenges of that, because it's a tough decision, especially when you're expected to go down one path. One path's very linear, get your degree, go into jobs, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going all in on poker. See you later, I'll give it a go. How was that moment for you, and what were some of the challenges there?
So of course it was quite a tough thing to say to my parents. In my family, there was never a choice on what you do after you finish high school. You just go to uni, decide what you want to study, and become a professional at a certain thing and get a degree. So I started studying economics, which I actually liked. I feel like it was a good choice for me. But obviously poker got in the way. At first it was manageable to do both things at the same time, because it was quite easy at first, getting through the first couple of years of uni. But then at some point some subjects were a lot harder, and you had to actually spend some time studying. And that time for studying I was using for poker. I was, most of my free time I was playing poker and just obsessed with that. And after some time just before I played cash games, I had some success. I won a tournament in Buenos Aires, in the casino, the only casino here that has poker. At that time I was going with some friends to a free roll that there was in this casino. I was already playing some online, but obviously super low stakes. But we would go to the casino to play this free roll, where you could entered the free roll for it. It was a satellite for a big tournament that was happening in that casino, and in the free roll you could just get in. You would get very few chips, but if you busted, you could rebuy by paying some amount. And also it had an add-on period where you actually, it was quite important to make the add-on because it was ridiculous the amount of chips that they would give you for that price. So yeah, I went there a couple times to play the free roll with the idea of just paying the fee for the add-on. If I lost before the add-on period, I would just go home. And yeah, I ended up satelliting to the tournament just by paying the add-on. It was maybe $15 or $20. I got the satellite in for an $500 MTT maybe, which in Argentina was quite a lot, and for me was quite a lot. And yeah, a couple days later, ended up winning that tournament for 16K. And in the process, it was a 3-day tournament. And in the process, when I got to the final day, to the final table, it was Sunday, and my parents were home. And I told them, yeah, I have this final table. The first prize is 16K, whatever. And my dad decided to come with me to check it out, to see what's going on. It was his first time. He was never the type of guy to go to casinos or anything. So yeah, basically my dad came with me. Then after a couple hours, my mom and my sister also came to watch me. And yeah, I had a great run. I started winning most of the all-ins and just won the tournament. So I feel like that was a big part on how they started accepting my poker career in some sense. I remember in Argentina, the inflation is crazy. And at that moment, this 16K was 400K pesos, which was already a lot, like a lot of bills, because we had maximum at the time. We had 100 pesos bills. I think when I won the tournament, it was 500 pesos bills, but for 400K pesos, it was like 2 bags worth of pesos. So it was quite crazy going home, like going to the cashier, winning the tournament, going to the cashier, getting 2 bags of cash, going back home with my parents that they just saw me win the tournament. And yeah, I feel like that sun run in that tournament made them accept, which actually it's funny because that doesn't mean anything at all. Like winning that tournament doesn't mean I'm a professional or anything. I was just lucky one time. But for the outside, that is what makes you a good poker player, you know. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest contributors of them being a bit more accepting about poker. After a couple of years of doing my degree, I decided, yeah, I just want to go all in on poker. I wasn't giving my 100% either on poker or on my career. And I was kind of lucky that at the moment my parents were getting divorced. So yeah, when I told them that I was going to quit uni, yeah, they were just so, they had in their head so many more stuff about, yeah, the divorce and whatever was going on. So yeah, my mom actually cared a lot. My dad was kind of fine with it. He just wanted me to be sure that I had like a period of 1 year where I would set myself a goal on how much money I had to make, because I had to give it a try. I could give it a try if I wanted to, but I had to set some proper goals on like how much money I could make. And I remember he told me, or I remember if he told me or I told him, yeah, I'm thinking about probably making 10K this year, the first year. So yeah, I had kind of that pressure in the first year, starting on cash games, to prove that I could make money. He ended up not asking or not really, coming for proof if I actually won that money. But I ended up winning like 11K that first year, which for me was, it was more proof to myself than to my dad, because yeah, if I didn't make it, I could still keep going on. I already could move out from my home and just decide to do it if I thought it was worth it. But yeah, that was my progression to move out of uni and give my all to poker.
Great story. I love the 2 bags of money walking with your dad with from the casino. It must have been a surreal moment. For you, did you feel like you had a bit of something to prove? Obviously, you've said to your parents you're going to make 10K that year, and you've gone for an untraditional path in terms of their eyes. Do you feel like that kind of fueled you to go more intensely for poker? And yeah, how were you kind of responding to that? Because I know some people, when they have external pressures, they kind of crumble. It feels like for you, with your personality, you kind of excel in that moment. So did you feel like you had something to prove and you had to make it work for yourself, but also to prove to your parents?
Yeah, definitely. Very likely had a big impact on how I took poker from the first time. Like, I knew I had to give my all and to be professional to make it work, to prove my parents and my family that it was actually worth it to go for it. But it was mostly about challenging myself also. Like, I always wanted to be independent and to do something for me, not to be working for someone else. And yeah, always had that kind of mindset. So poker fit perfectly with that. And it also had the aspect of it being a game, which I loved. And yeah, it felt like a no-brainer to me. It was obviously a hard move to just get away from uni, but for me it was quite clear that it was a great move, and I could always go back if I wasn't succeeding.
In every top sport, data is used to find bigger edges, and poker is no different. Alongside using solvers to build a strong theoretical foundation, I started studying population tendencies back in 2016 to get a more accurate picture on how people actually played. I went from trying to mind read my opponents to clearly seeing where their exploits were and which decisions were actually plus EV. Once my decisions were rooted in data, I stopped second-guessing my bluffs, calls and folds, and became far less affected by short-term results, as I now knew exactly what the ranges really looked like. Just like solvers have evolved from setting up your own PioSims to effortlessly browsing any solution you want in GTO Wizard, data has gone through the same evolution. What used to require massive databases, powerful computers and hours of manual work is now fully accessible instantly in your browser thanks to SnapNDA. With SnapNDA, studying how humans really play has now become more powerful and accessible than ever before. You get access to over 450 million hands played across all major sites, removing any sample size issues or guesswork. SnapNDA automatically compares human tendencies to GTO play and instantly shows you the EV of your plays. Alongside river bluffing frequencies, it shows flop and turn range compositions not distorted by showdown bias, allowing you to clearly see where ranges are too strong and too weak so you can avoid and strike accordingly. You can filter for any specific player profile, from aggressive to passive rags and from small fish to big whales, and start to see that what looks random in isolation actually follows clear, predictable patterns once you zoom out. In short, SnapNDA shows you exactly what the ranges really look like, from pre-flop all the way to the river, and once you know the ranges, the correct strategy becomes much clearer. You can even analyze the strategies of top performers or this group of bots that have been consistently crushing the games. So if you're tired of uncertainty and over-relying on blockers to make decisions, SnapNDA can help. Start with a 7-day free trial and get 15% off your description using code MECHANICS, link down below. But without further ado, let's continue with today's episode.
One of the hardest things about being a poker player is dealing with downswings. And in the questionnaire, we ask, what's your biggest rock bottom moment? And for you, you said you didn't have one. However, you've lost 50 to 60% of your bankroll multiple times, but that didn't register as a peak negative. For you, how are you able to take big downswings or big losses and not create a narrative around that? Because most people would have answered the questionnaire with, yeah, this one time where I lost 50%, it was really tough. But for you, you haven't got that narrative, and just listening to you speak over the last hour, you feel very acceptant of results. So yeah, where does that come from, and how do you deal with prolonged periods where you're not winning?
Yeah, so most of those times that I maybe lost like 50% of my bankroll mostly happened at the start of my career, and also, yeah, they happen to be with off-poker related stuff. Like, I decided to travel quite a bit. In my first year of playing cash games, I decided to go to Andorra for 3 months, just to live the experience to ski for the whole season and play poker. And yeah, that ended up not going so well. I spent a lot of money in those 3 months, which I probably wasn't ready to do, and I was grinding 100 mil at that moment. And for those 3-4 months, things didn't go very well. I spent a lot of money, so yeah, that's when I saw my bankroll shrink a lot. But then, yeah, I just felt well. And the other thing that comes to mind is when I previously at 25 NL, when I was grinding 25 NL, and I was 30 binds down EV, under EV. But my main thought, it was like, yeah, this is not gonna matter a lot. This is not gonna matter at all when I'm playing the next levels. I always knew this was not my ceiling, of course, and I kind of was treating it as a good thing to have this kind of negative variance at these stakes when I was pretty sure that I was gonna make it and play the higher stakes. So yeah, always kind of trying to have a good attitude whenever these things happen, and never letting it get out of control or those things happening because of me going like crazy and play higher stakes than I should. Trying to just stay focused, realizing that that's something that can happen, and yeah, just move forward.
You seem to be somebody who can both accept bad outcomes or short-term negativity, but also you're able to zoom out and see the long term. You mentioned as well, like earlier, a similar skill set when you're on a bad run, you'll zoom out to look at your lifetime results. In here, when you're on a big downswing, you did a similar thing where you said, oh, well, when I'm playing higher stakes, this is not going to matter. So you give yourself a longer time span. I really feel like a lot of problems get created by zooming in, making a real big deal in the short term, rather than allowing time to play out and seeing it in perspective of a longer time scale. So yeah, it definitely feels for you, your ability to do that has really helped you to stay solid through downswings. Because I know a lot of players would go for the same experience as you, when the mind gets very busy, very active, and starts creating a big drama out of the situation. So for you, in terms of confidence, you seem like a very confident person who believes in himself. What do you do when confidence slips a little bit? Or does your confidence ever waver? And obviously confidence isn't something that's always static, in terms of where you've maybe tried to shot take a new level, you've hit your head against the wall, maybe reach some better players who are like, actually, these guys are pretty good. Have you ever had moments where you haven't backed yourself? And if you have, how have you pushed past those periods?
Yeah, of course I do have moments where my confidence slips. Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend I'm like a mental game god or anything at all. Like, I do have my periods where I struggle, but it mostly comes back to the just looking at my long-term results, going to the poker variance calculator, talking to some poker friends, realizing everybody has gone through these periods, that it's part of the game, and how good you can stand these moments and how you can move forward from them is what's going to define you from as a player. So that's basically my way to go. Mostly just trying to stay professional, realize like I didn't do anything wrong, it's part of the game, and move forward.
You mentioned earlier about performing under pressure, and this is very keen for when you're playing higher levels. I'm curious to know for you, like, how you're able to do that, because a lot of players do struggle. You mentioned faster heart rates. A lot of people will get overwhelmed when their physiology reacts. Let's say you're trying to take a new level to the 40k NL game, that's your start to run. It's like, yes, great spot, great opportunity. Mentally, it's great. The risk to reward is worth it. But internally, your body responds to the stress of the new challenge. More cortisol, more adrenaline. What happens if this doesn't work? The mind and the body can get very busy or overactivated, and some people can't perform well in that state. Others, like yourself, they enjoy that. They like that. They're like, yes, this is it. This is a life. So for you, performing under pressure, I just love to know some things that come to mind in terms of when you are in big games, you are shotting new stakes. What's different about how you feel, and how are you able to use that to perform well?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a fuel for me in some sense. I do get stressed about moving to a higher stake or playing these huge games. But I just try to keep my composure and just analyze if I actually have an edge. And if I do have an edge, I feel comfortable in the game. Try to analyze the other players. What's my game plan gonna be? against different profiles and the recreational itself, how he's playing. Try to look at the showdowns. Try to do everything I can to reassure where my edge is coming from, and to be confident that it's a good game that I'm at, and that it's okay if it goes wrong. But I took a good opportunity.
What do you do when things start going wrong, or you notice your performance is dropping? Let's say you're in that 40k NL game, you drop 2 buy-ins early, and you're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable in this game. Are you aware of that? Are you like kind of checking in with yourself? And then what are some of your things to do to either get out of those situations or to get yourself back performing well?
I do, for sure. Like, I do, for such a big game, I would have a stop loss. I didn't really set it in stone, but I knew that if I lost 3 buy-ins, I was just gonna quit. You need to have some kind of stop loss if it's gonna affect you too much. So I knew I was comfortable with that. That's basically how I treated that spot in particular. And it's, whenever it goes wrong, I just move down, take a break, review my hands, talk about my hands with some friends, go back to some coaching sessions where I learned something that really made me want to play. Like, I have a couple coaches that on BitB that almost every session they do, it makes me like want to play again, and it motivates me to just understand the concepts they're teaching and go apply them in game. So I have a couple kind of tricks to get my mind in the right mindset, to go back to playing and to being in a positive attitude, to be ready to play again.
I love that, because a lot of players get stuck in the narrative. They've lost X amount at the new stake. They start creating narratives around, maybe I'm failing, maybe I'm not good enough. And for you, it feels like you just get back to what you enjoy, get back to why you play poker, what's fun for you, what's curious for you, and you use that to kind of balance those moments. We've talked a lot about risk and reward, and you've mentioned for yourself, like you choose games based on risk rewards. How do you make that calculation? Obviously, we can, on some level, say what's the EV of the game we're playing, but also with risk, there's an element of, there's a downside that you need to be able to deal with. So, for example, let's say that 40k NL game, if you lose 3 buy-ins, on paper it looks okay, well and good, I've lost 3 buy-ins, that's 120k, obviously you've got some action sold there, but that's a big thing to have to take emotionally and also mentally. So for when you're taking risks, you also need to be able to handle the downside as much as be okay with the upside. So for you, how do you think about risk for yourself? How do you kind of make sure you're always taking risks? It feels like you're the kind of guy who's on the edge of pushing risk for yourself, and you're obviously daily making these kind of calculations of terms of risk reward. I'm just curious to know for you, how do you think about those situations?
Well, with time and experience, you start to realize where certain leaks on recreationals or also on regs, how much money they could be leaking on those, and how you could punish them if you have certain tools to punish those leaks. And that's where you realize you have an edge on certain player types. But specifically on recreationals, you can get a pretty good feeling on how big of a recreational they are right after like a couple hands, just looking at a couple showdowns, how much their VPIP is or whatever. You get a sense. You're never gonna be certain about it, but you start getting a sense on how big they could be, how big of a wreck they could be. And also trying to be aware of how much the rake is in the context, in the games you're playing, because they can vary a lot from side to side, and it can be a huge part of it. So just trying to take both things into the calculation. Never like, I'm not really actually thinking like making any math on what my win rate is at the table, but you start to get a feeling, and you know what your previous results at a certain stake were, what your game selection was in that sample, and start to get a feel on when you're actually winning at quite a decent margin, and when those spots could be like quite marginal and maybe better to just let them go.
Yeah, so for you, it seems that you've got a very clear criteria of what spots are good based on the recs in those games. And obviously you're calibrating that based on when you're playing in other lineups and maybe not get the win rates. And then when those moments appear, you're able to play the games. Doesn't matter how high, you'll sell action. It feels like you've got almost like an alarm rings off. Hey, these games are good. I've got to seize this opportunity. It sounds like you've got a good fill list for that. Rene, for yourself, how did you decide when was the right moment to make a jump in stakes, to dip your toes into a new level? What were some of the things that went through your mind when you were making similar decisions?
I would say it's very similar to what Agustín is explaining. He explains a lot about understanding where the EV comes from, right? The confidence didn't just fall out of the sky. He knows the environment. He knows the risks involved. He sees this as a high EV spot. He knows how the EV is going to come to him, right? He mentioned like the game plan. He knows recreational. He knows leaks on the players. And at some point when I think they say, right, when preparation meets opportunity, I think there's a quote, something along these lines. Do you recall it, Adam?
Yeah, it is something like that. When preparation meets opportunity, that's when you get your kind of success.
Yeah. So it's not like the preparation has to be there. And then when you see the opportunity and you are prepared because you know the leaks of the guys, you know exactly how the game is going to play out, confidence will follow. You sit down and you see, even though the money might not actually be coming to you, you see it coming to you because you see the mistakes, you see the game is going the way you predicted it, So yeah, it's very easy to be confident even though the results short term don't come your way. So yeah, I see a lot of similarities. I'm wondering though, in this whole conversation, like it's no surprise the success that you had and that you're having. If I sum up all the things, there's a lot of wisdom in this podcast so far. How have you been able to keep the ego in check, and how is your relationship with your ego?
It's funny because I feel like I'm quite self-confident, but at the same time, I'm really aware of one of the biggest problems poker players have is letting their ego, to feed their ego too much and start playing games where they're actually not beating. So not sure how or why, but I try to really stay in line with that. And I definitely, I don't think I'm particularly the best player or technically, there's so many aspects of the game, and there's definitely players that are much stronger than me in some of them, for sure. So I try to stay in line with my plan. Try to be better every day. Try to still keep improving. I feel like even at the higher stakes, there's so many areas and so many parts of the game tree, and strategically, and not to mention mental game wise, so many things about poker and how poker players approach the game that can still be improved infinitely. Like poker is such a complex game, and the strategy aspect of it and the theory behind everything, every play and every strategy is just infinite, and you can just work on so many things that I feel like the ceiling is like not even close. Not for me and not for anyone, I feel like. But I still try to have that beginner's mindset. We can still learn a lot. I'm happy that I still have a lot of interest about learning new stuff and getting motivation from that also. And try to stay with an open mind about anything new that can come up with my way of thinking about the game and how I approach it, both technically and away from the tables.
Another big contributor that I think keeps on coming back in the conversation as well at various points is being in the right environment, right? You mentioned you obviously bit B and being involved in that crew, also how that helped you, right? Seeing the guys around you play higher stakes, shot higher stakes, succeed at higher stakes. In terms of coaches, any big leaps in evolution that stand out to you throughout your career that you got from working with the right people?
Yeah. So basically, in terms of strategical aspects of the game and how I actually perform in game, I'm quite happy that I got to study and to get coached. Firstly, by this Argentinian poker player, that he was more of the exploit and trying to get the most out of the leaks that you can see on a player's HUD. That's more the Spanish style. The almost all players. Well, you've had Raúl Mestre on the podcast. He is the main guy that made all Spanish poker players play the way they do. Almost all of them come from his teachings, and almost everyone learns from him. So in South America, in Argentina, also there's a huge influence on how players approach the game regarding that. So it was quite a good and quite fortunate to get him as a first coach. I feel like for micro stakes, you really shouldn't be going too deep into how everything works so deeply, and there's so many opportunities to get EV from other players, and both regs and recreationals, just by trying to solve the game intuitively and look for leaks on players' HUDs. And that gave me a solid ground to step on after for the first year. And then just when I got into BitB, I started learning more about how the game actually works, like how the mechanics of poker work, how theory plays in different parts of the game tree. So many concepts to learn that make you realize what is actually happening and what drives different strategies in game. So I kind of have a mixture of both poker schools, you could say, more the GTO style or theory approach for the game with BitB, which made me have a higher ceiling, because I feel like the Spanish approach is pretty good, but if you don't go deep into more GTO or theory approach, it's going to be harder for you to break into actual high stakes. There obviously are a lot of players that still do, but I feel like for most players, it puts a ceiling on how far they can get. So that's I kind of luckily had this path of having both ways of thinking about the game and trying to mix both and implement and just pay attention to both aspects of the game.
This is actually a very big struggle of a lot of people listening, right? They hear, right, this camp, oh, you should play exploit poker, no, you should follow theory, no, you should play GTO. How do you find the right balance, or maybe better said, how do you know what is most important?
Yeah, it's hard to find an actual balance, because the more time you spend on something, you're just letting the other part of the game just sleep. Or that happens with everything. You cannot be a super specialist on too many things, and it's common for people to just follow one path and just stay in that line, and that works for many. But I feel like having both approaches and having both things in mind, and having quite solid friends and groups on both sides, makes me just take the game with a more open mindset, and just not stay too stubborn on just, oh, this is how the game should be, or how the game should be played. And I feel like both areas have a lot of importance to have in mind and to study. And I feel like neglecting one side or the other is just definitely a bad idea.
Why do you think so many players get trapped in like one framework, right? Because you have some guys that, they kind of label themselves, no, I'm a theory guy, or I'm an MDA guy, or I'm an exploit guy.
Yeah.
You said like one of your qualities clearly that you're open-minded to various ideas. Why do you think some players get trapped in that framework, and how have you managed to escape getting stuck?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of natural that you have like a team and you want to defend your team and how they think, or yeah, it happens in football, for example, not specifically about you being Barca fan or whatever, but about the different styles of how to play the game. A lot of people like really defend the type of game that Guardiola used to or has, or some others prefer Simeone's type, and yeah, they're not really open that there could be a mixture of both. And I feel like in poker, it happens the same. People just feel like they have to take sides and just want to stay. Yeah, they want to go all the way and think their way is the correct way. But yeah, being open to different styles is definitely a good trait to have, not only in poker but in every area.
Have you always been this open-minded, or can you recall maybe a point where you were also a bit stubborn and did it required opening your mind to admit that maybe you were wrong holding on to a certain idea?
I feel like I'm quite lucky that at my first year I learned how to play this way, and then I realized how theory or how GTO works. I always saw the Spanish approach and Raúl Mestre as a great source of inspiration and how to see poker and how you can still play this way or think about it this way. Maybe not taking so much to the extremes, but still take into account this kind of way of thinking, summed up with actual learning how the game works and what's the theory behind it and why you're doing certain moves and why you're choosing certain sizings. I feel like that's where both things meet for me. And just I do have my times where maybe I'm going too much into one area. Obviously, when I got into BitB, it was a time to just focus a lot on theory, on how my new coaches were thinking about the game. And I'm really happy that I kind of ditched for some time the way of thinking like too much about trying to exploit every single thing, and more about trying to learn how the game works. But it takes time for me to just get a balance and be open to both.
What are like some teachings of like the Spanish school that you keep dominant top of mind despite having now a more solid theoretical foundation that you got at BitB? What were like some of the things that despite all these teachings, despite everything that it does, you said no, this remains top of mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is just knowing what certain stats should look like. Actually knowing what a river fold should be and what a player's river fold is, or how much your civet flop is and what they're doing, or the check raise, or any kind of stats that a lot of GTO players, they're just thinking about their strategy and not paying attention to a huge deviation a certain player has on a specific node of the game. They don't really know what the stat should be, or what, even though they claim that they are GTO experts, they don't know what the GTO number is, and they aren't ready to punish, or they are not even paying attention to that leak of Beeline. They're just playing their game, looking at a showdown, and maybe find something, and it works for a lot of people for sure. That's perfectly fine. But just understanding how to exploit those leaks and finding them and understanding how and which are the best ways to get to that nodes and to exploit them effectively.
On the flip side, let's say I give you a typical guy from the Spanish school right now. What would be like the first things you would kind of have him unlearn? Like what like the first thing they say? Okay, this is definitely flawed in the Spanish school. This is what I have to get out of you. Or this is what I have to teach you on top of it. That you're clearly missing.
I feel like the first thing is to understand where you should use certain sizings, like why certain sizings are being used. And you don't have to like you can keep a solid strategy and a good sizing scheme to play against almost everyone. You don't need to like be making it up all the time. And yeah, just it's mostly about their understanding of what is going on. They're just not paying attention or not studying that aspect of the game, which is like obviously a huge driving factor of where you get EV from, and they're just making it up too much. That's the extreme cases. That would be the first thing that comes to mind. They're just you don't need to be making it up all the time. You can understand and have a solid plan before executing.
Yeah, I like that. I kind of see it as like theory, like shows you what's on the menu, but what you're gonna pick, that kind of depends on, you know, the situation that you're at. If you're gonna go for dessert, yes or no, well, it depends on the situation, you know. But at least you stick to the menu. You don't start to invent all those things around it.
Yeah, exactly. And because at a certain level, players start to know what you're doing, and what you're trying to do. And if you're not like there are still some players that can manage to play that way and to get away with it, but for most of them, it starts to like not work good enough when their competition is, I don't know, 1K or 2K NL. There's not so many guys that you can push around so blatantly like the way they do.
You mentioned one of your ways to kind of get your mojo back, so to speak, was to, you know, look at like some coaching sessions of some of the big beat coachings, and, you know, in which you learn to kind of like a couple of concepts. It's like, oh yeah, you know, to get you motivated again. Any like big lessons one of the big beat coaches taught you that really stood out to you and really changed the way how you see the game and how you play the game? Any big aha moments?
I wouldn't be able to tell one in particular. It doesn't come to my mind right now, but yeah, just many normal things that you see every day, and I was just using from memory and not really understanding why they would happen. Getting like coached and understanding on what is actually going on behind it, and why you're choosing this size and not that one, or why, I don't know, out of position you play this way. What's the driving factor on playing out of position compared to in position? What kind of strategies you use, sizings you use? Mostly about not taking them from memory, and that's just like intuitively using them because you've been doing it for so long, but understanding why this happens in a deeper way.
How did your experience of playing poker change after you started to understand the why? What kind of opened up for you?
I don't know. I feel like it gives you more confidence about looking at other players' plays and realizing like they're actually just making it up all the time, and everybody kind of is still making it up, but you start to realize there's so many things that people do wrong and that I was also doing wrong, and you can now find the way to get back to them and to just not let those big mistakes, big theoretical mistakes, or just incorrect plays get passed by, and you can just understand why and how you can exploit them back.
Yeah, and that some people make mistakes. Obviously, like you have mistakes that you can not actively exploit, but sometimes people just also simply exploit themselves by just literally, you know, playing their hand in a really silly way. It's like, wait, I got off the hook here. This is costing you a lot of money because you're clearly making a theoretical mistake here. Yeah. You know, and again, like this comes back from the confidence, right? Because if you increase your theoretical knowledge or technical knowledge, and you see people making these mistakes that you're not making, that obviously then boosts your confidence again, makes you play better, gives you more plus severe opportunities. Again, it kind of falls on the category of what you said earlier, right? Seeing how the EV is going to flow to you helps recognize your edge.
Yeah, and that's where I think some players of the Spanish school, you could say, or there's also many other kind of schools that play this way. But that's where they can just, yeah, they're just making it up so much unnecessarily. Like you could actually learn how the spot works, and you're not actually exploiting anything. You're just playing bad at certain moments.
You also already mentioned kind of like other schools. Obviously, there's other countries. Yeah, there's Spanish Europeans. I think you also mentioned, you have the Russians, you have the Americans. What defines these countries?
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell. I'm very specific. I've never really put players into a certain group too much. Well, it's easy to identify, and I'm more aware of how Spanish players work because that's the way I started understanding the game. So maybe I feel more confident about what they are doing. But then on other kind of player types, player groups or schools, I try to not get too much into a certain type of thinking of how they play because I've never been too detailed about what their general ways of playing. I do have a couple things that I can think about, but I mostly try to look at each specific individual because I'm quite certain about the Spanish players because I mostly know who they are or have an idea because of friends of who they could be, which player they getting coached by or where they learned poker from. But then, for example, a random Russian is at the table, and I actually have no idea what their background is. Yes, I can see they can make some particular plays that some Russians do, but I try to just take it with a grain of salt and just try to pay more attention about their specific individual leagues.
Are you grinding hard, studying solvers, reviewing hands, but still not getting those results that you know you're capable of? You're putting in the time and effort, but without clear direction, that effort does not pay off. That is why I created the Mechanics League Buster program, which is the exact system I use to make over 7 figures playing online poker and have since taught to hundreds of students so they could do the same. Through our League Finder stats and pop-ups, you will gain clarity on your biggest leagues and tendencies, insights on how your strategies have been performing in-game, and the impact variance has had on your results. But knowing your stats is only the beginning. In the program, we dig deep into the root causes behind your leaks and tendencies and use a proven 7-step system to fix them for good and gain the skills to improve and continuously evolve as a poker player. You'll study more effectively, overcome leaks and tendencies that felt impossible to break, and rebuild trust and confidence in your game, finally seeing your hard work pay off as you move up the stakes. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start improving with clarity, break through the patterns that have been holding you back, and take your game to the next level, join the Mechanics League Buster program using the link down below.
You mentioned to Adam earlier when you summed up your routine that like the first hour or 2 hours of your day you spent studying. I'm curious, like, what is something that you spent this 1 and 2 hours studying on, and in general, how your study process has evolved over your career and what ended up working best for you?
I mostly review my hands, review my played hands that I marked from previous sessions. Usually, just get deep into a certain hand that I feel like is important or has something that I really didn't understand or wasn't sure about what the play was, and try to dig deep into the reasoning behind it, try to understand why the solver thinks or plays the way it does. That's the main part. Then also watching the coaching videos, live coaching that we have, reviewing some hands of friends, talking with friends. We have a couple, I sometimes study with a friend also, and we review hands together or look at a certain topic. And I feel like it hasn't changed too much. Like maybe at certain moments I was going more deep into like going into the full BitB coaching sessions library that I hadn't watched before, and trying to learn more in that way. But I feel like it's mostly been quite consistent also. Like yeah, mostly reviewing hands, talking with friends, and that's it.
Or I heard sometimes some players say that, you know, in the past how we learned poker was basically we only discussed with friends, right? Because there was no one else to consult. But at some point, you know, with the solvers coming out and MDA, you name it, there's so much tools that, you know, people say, oh, you know, I can just ask the solver. I don't have to speak to people anymore. But what for you has been the value to have like people to talk hands with?
I feel like the main thing is having the community to stay motivated and to like see what our other players are doing, realize how different profiles think different ways, but there's still like ways to get to common ground and to just learn together. And I feel like just also having the sense of community to look at results from different players, knowing they are very good, but they also have their moments where they have long periods of downswings, and just realizing when you're in a group with 20 or 30 guys, almost all the time someone is going through a hard time, and you realize it's nothing personal with you when it happens. It happens to everyone. Every time you are in a rough stretch, someone else also is, and you have to also be grateful when things are going well, because then you have to remember it's also that's not what you deserve. That's just also you're getting the good part of variance sometimes. But I feel like for me the biggest contributor to having a community has been staying motivated, looking at new players coming up in the group, getting fuel from their new motivation, that new players coming and just trying to learn more, and you looking at your side and knowing that a new guy is studying and grinding a lot, and it also makes you stay in line of like, I cannot lay back because there's always new guys trying to take your spot.
Nice, I like it. Yeah, that kind of reaches the or ups the necessity, right? It's inspiring as well. Yeah, I can definitely see that working very motivating. What do you think players misunderstand about what it takes to make it in poker? What do you think what is something that you think players spend too much or too little effort on?
I feel like the biggest thing that maybe players neglect or players fail to get over is the mental game part of it. Of course, to get to a certain level, you need to have a good theoretical game, or just you need to be a good player. Of course, there's no neglecting about it. But I feel like it's not impossible for a guy to just learn how to play properly, and it doesn't take genius to get up to, I don't know, 500 NL, 1K NL. It's mostly about having the right guidance. I feel like a lot of players, as I said before, a lot of players go their own ways nowadays. That solvers are open for everyone. Talking to other people is maybe not as necessary as it used to be, and talking about poker with other friends. But when going your own way, it's a lot harder to get to the destination, because you can have the solver the same way as any other high stakes player has. But if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to take you too far. And as I was saying, the mental game aspect, I feel like, is what makes a lot of players stay at lower stakes and fail to move up. Because if you game select well, if you put yourself in good spots, and you have a decent level for every stake that you move by, the only thing, one of the biggest things that you still need is to have the strength to lose as much as you can lose when you're at the higher stakes. So I feel like that's where most players leak, and what a lot of players don't give importance to, or just don't have the ability to support the problems and how hard it can be when you're dealing with so much bigger swings.
You mentioned the mental game there, and that's the biggest struggle. What do players need to work on to fix this? I always feel like mindset's very similar to your strategy in terms of learning skills, improving approaches that can help you to deal with more scenarios. You mentioned there that dealing with losing and losing big amounts of money is a challenge. Why is it challenging? And what do you feel like players experience that holds them back from performing at their best?
Well, I feel like the way they mostly could fix it is by actually getting a professional that can hear how they think and what their problems are and how to change those bad habits and ways of thinking about poker and results. So basically, I feel like that would be a good start, like getting a professional that has a good track record on players that work with them. You can always, if you're in the poker landscape, you will know players that worked with a psychologist or with a mindset coach. I feel like that's a quite important way to start if that's an area that you're struggling with. And just staying in contact with friends and just talking about your struggles and hearing them also, like being able to understand what other people go through and realizing you're not there on your own. And I feel like can be a good way to just be more professional on that aspect.
Where did you get your mental game knowledge from?
I remember when I was starting, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts and videos that a Spanish psychologist was doing on YouTube. His name was Rodrigo Rio Lizani. I spent a lot of time listening to his podcasts, and that was a good solid ground that I found at the start, I feel like.
Anything specific that stands out to you or that you recall from this podcast?
Well, it comes to mind like one specific thing. It's not like a life-changing thing, but it's about being in the right mindset to grind. And I remember him saying that when you get grinding and when you're working at home, it's important, for example, that you don't stay in your pajamas all day. That you have to change attitude to just decide when you're starting to grind. And that could take place on different by doing different things, like taking a shower and starting work, or doing a warm-up thing before your sessions or whatever. But this thing for some reason stuck now, and this is what came to mind, like dressing up properly for work and just changes your attitude towards what you're doing, not staying all day in the same like mindset, I guess.
Yeah, I can actually strongly relate with this point specifically. And I remember I mentioned this pretty recent actually somewhere. I think I was on a stream or something, and people were kind of like, wait, but the good thing about, being a poker player is that you can just grind in your pajamas. I said, no, I don't agree. I feel way better when I take a shower, do my hair, put on like some nice clothes, but you're not going out of the house anyway. So yeah, but it does feel different.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is just a small thing, but I think a lot of these small things add up. And it's like, finding a good way that works for you to be in the proper mindset to work properly.
But if I talk for myself here, I recall like a similar sort of eye-opening, like you mentioned one specific thing, but for me what was more eye-opening is just the realization that there's a link to doing these kind of things and how you perform. Like not taking your performance for granted. Was that also kind of what this podcast taught you? And from there, you give a quote silly example, but from there, you start to experiment with all other things that could have an impact on how you perform.
Yeah, for sure. Something like this could sound small, but there's a lot of small things and ways to think about what you're doing that make you a better professional and you're ready to take on the huge task that is facing poker variance and swings and whatever. You will have so many moments of struggle that you need to be ready to face them and to be able to overcome them.
You mentioned the warm up there as well. Anything in particular that you've experimented with, or some things that you really have to do before grinding?
No, not really. I don't do any specific warm-ups. Obviously, yeah, just one thing that is always happening is I'm taking the phone out of the room, but not too much. Yeah, I don't really have a warm-up routine.
Yeah, I think it touches on the importance of preparing to perform. And we can't just snap our fingers and be in the right state of mind to perform at our best for what we're doing. We need to alter our physiology, we need to alter our state of mind in order to show up as our best self. And this is across the board, whether you're looking at athletes or poker players. Like, you need to enter a certain state of mind to align with the activity you're doing. You wouldn't just say to like a Usain Bolt who's just sitting there, go, hey, go sprint 100 meters. You'd go, give me 15 minutes to get myself prepared. And obviously it's different for poker, but we also need to prepare ourselves. And I think it's like that approach to the grind, that this matters. I'm going to shower, I'm going to get dressed, I'm going to look at my notes before the session starts, I'm ready to perform at a high level. You alter your state, of mind, and you also alter your physiology. And I think that's really important when you're shifting throughout your days. You're going from being a dad, being a friend, being just a lazy lout on the sofa, to go, right, I'm entering performance mode. Let's go. And you've got like a preparation for yourself that allows you to do that. I think's really important. Yeah, you mentioned there for like mindset, kind of building a strong mindset was really good. You're talking like different tools, and throughout this conversation I've been kind of writing down that, like, what you're good at, and it feels like for you perspective's a real big skill. Zooming out, seeing like longer term lens, seeing things for what they are. Acceptance, it feels like you're very good at accepting results. You take these kind of calculated risks and you're happy with whatever outcomes come with it. That shared experience you mentioned with Rene there as well, in terms of a community around you when things aren't going well. That's when a community really helps to lean on to realize I'm not the only person going through this. It's normal. It feels like for you, they've really helped you to keep a strong mindset when things around you aren't going well. And I think that's one of the skills, as you touched on as well as a poker player, one of the harder parts. The harder part being a poker player is, how do you not melt down when things are going badly? How do you keep your confidence high and keep showing up when you're on a 6-month downswing? How do you keep that kind of belief, confidence, but also keep performing and showing up? I think for you, you've been a really good example of that. So looking back on your career, what would you say has been the most important lesson poker has taught you so far?
Yeah, coming back to your point from just now, yeah, I think there's so many players that in the process just melt down. They cannot stand it, and I think it's no wonder why most poker players don't have such a long career. Like, it's not easy mentally to stand what poker brings, and yeah, it's mentally very tough. So longevity in the game and actually like staying at a decent level for a long time and maintaining your composure and your love for the game, I feel like it's one aspect that sometimes get neglected or players don't think too much about it, but it is actually a huge positive aspect of a poker player's career.
How do you keep your own longevity? What are some of the things that keep poker fun, keep it interesting, keep it challenging? How do you kind of make sure you're always engaged with poker?
Yeah, so I find it quite easy by having a couple coaching sessions from some big coaches that actually make me always go back to new stuff, to understanding different stuff, and go back to falling in love with the game like almost every month. So I'm quite fortunate about that, because I feel like I could be also in some different scenario. I could be one of those guys that are just playing just because they have to, but not really because they want to, and struggling mentally. Yeah, when you have this community and this source of motivation to keep going, it makes your career a lot more fun to keep doing, and just to enjoy it in the process and not have to do it because it's your job.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is the key to longevity. It's keeping the game fun, keeping yourself curious, keeping yourself learning. If you look at all the people who have long, decade-long careers, they keep the enthusiasm and curiosity for the game high, whereas others maybe treat it as like an achievement game of trying to get to a certain goal, a certain level, and at some point they lose that love of the game, the love of learning, love of getting better, and that's when poker becomes more of a job that you're just showing up for, and that's obviously the telltale signs that longevity is going to be more difficult for you. But yeah, I really like that. You've got it around you, new ideas. You mentioned new people coming into the group. You're a competitive guy, so I'm sure when a new up-and-comer comes with new ideas, looks hungry, you're like, oh, this guy's going to become my spot. I best step it up and make sure I keep him waiting for a bit longer. So yeah, it feels for you and your personality, that's a great environment to be in. So yeah, just a few reflection questions for yourself in terms of looking back on your poker career. What would you say is the most important lesson poker's taught you so far?
I don't know. I feel like the main thing that poker teaches you is to detach from the results and to just, yeah, not take everything as like, oh, this is so unlucky or so lucky. Just part of life. Like, just like poker, there's gonna be good things that happen, bad things. You're gonna be lucky some days, unlucky on some others. You're gonna be having some huge downswings in life also. But the best way to think about it is just try to stay positive and try to remember that after a big downswing, the upswing is gonna come too. If you stay professional in some sense, if you stay positive in life, I'd say, you're gonna have bad times, but you're gonna also have very good times. So I feel like that's kind of related to poker, and yeah, I feel like that's a big difference I can see from poker players, good poker players, or some of my friends compared to how people treat their day-to-day lives. Whenever something bad happens, it's just, okay, I just have to deal with this now.
Yeah, I like the analogy of seasons. Like, we have seasons for everything. And some seasons are tough, some seasons are challenging, but every season ends and a new season starts. So anytime you're stuck in a bad patch, it's really good to remember this won't last forever. At some point, I'll be out of this and I'll be on the next trajectory. I think, yeah, perspective, it's really good to look back. You can always look back and go, oh yeah, of course that was going to end. But sometimes when you're in a situation, you lose sight of that. You lose sight of the fact that this isn't going to last forever. And there's a part of the mind that can ruminate or catastrophize, where we almost like play out the current scenario times 6 more months, times another year, and we start to worry. This is the mind's way of trying to help you to deal with the problems ahead, but actually just makes it much worse. I think on downswings, I see a lot of players getting overly attached to results, but just panicking too much, just worrying that it's going to last forever, and then they start changing their approaches, changing how they're showing up, lose confidence, and then what started as just a bit of variance turns into a big deal that's derailing them. So yeah, I think it's really good to remember that it's just a passing period that you'll get back to. For you mentioned that you used to watch the 40k games on PokerStars, and they were like the idols of the game. Then you got to play those games yourself recently. Did it feel the way you expected?
Yeah, it felt, like I said, it felt like a true accomplishment to be able to sit in those games. It was quite a special moment. I feel like, moving up every stake, it always felt like, I can still go on. There's more to come. But this particular session that I got to play, this 40k game, it was like, for a couple of days, I had this feeling of, okay, I kind of made it. It's the highest step you can step on.
Did anything change after that? Did you feel more motivated? Did you feel like a big chapter had been ticked off and that's changed how you thought about your future goals, or what happened after that?
Yeah, well, maybe it actually lowered a bit my motivation for a couple of days. I don't know. Yeah, I have a lot of things in the moment that I have my mind on. So it's been a couple weeks where I haven't been grinding so much. Everything's super positive. Like, I'm moving with a friend. I'm also going to Vegas, and then afterwards I'm going to Europe for a month and a half to spend some time with some friends and to do some sports competitions with them. So a lot of good things coming up, but it actually has lowered my time spent in poker. I don't know if it's particularly because of this 40k game. I don't think necessarily, but as we said, it's part of it. It's just seasons where you're gonna be more motivated, more into grinding, more into studying, and then at this point in my career, I'm happy to be able to take a couple weeks or even months off, which always bring me back some of the motivation to come back stronger and to have a good period of time where I grind hard.
I think for most of us, we have a big motivation drop after reaching a big goal, which is quite normal because a lot of the dopamine that's driving you is that kind of anticipation of what the goal is going to be like. Then you get to the goal, get the big dopamine release, and it's like, oh, now what? Either it meets your expectations and you're like, this is great, and you can kind of feel grateful for it, but then you're like, what now? What next? And that kind of release period where you feel it's going to be a peak moment often leads to a little bit of, actually I feel a bit less motivated. I always know myself, anytime I set a big goal and arrive there, it's like, oh, now what? And you've got to really just take time to realign, let the dopamine reset itself, and to find time to align with your next goals, your next visions that are going to be the next things you're chasing. But yeah, I think it's very common. I know myself, definitely, I fall victim of that one. I would want to know for yourself, let's say you could give some advice for a young player who's similar to you, got a lot of self-confidence, very driven. Maybe he's playing mid-stakes right now and he wants to play high stakes like you, but he feels a bit overwhelmed. I know in the poker world, like listening to how to get better at poker, I can feel like this overwhelming mountain to climb. Is there any advice you'd give to that type of player to maybe simplify the path or to make sure he's doing the right things?
Yeah, I would say just try to not complicate things too much, both strategically and just every aspect that poker brings. Like, yeah, I feel like a lot of players nowadays feel like they have to like know exactly why this blocker or which blocker they have to bluff in this spot, and they're missing out on the most important aspects of the game and the biggest possibilities to gain edge and to gain EV. And yeah, probably that's the main thing I think about. Just try to not complicate things so much and go back to the roots of why a certain play wins money and where there's actually a lot of money to be made or a lot of EV to be generated compared to just being so intricate about two specific things.
Do you think that things need to get complicated before they get simple? Because let's say that player is trying to simplify, but they don't know what to simplify because everything feels important. And I know for myself, a lot of time when I'm trying to understand things, I get lost in the complexity of it. And then at some point later it comes simple. And I'm like, of course, it was simple all along, but it had to get complicated first. Have you noticed that for yourself in terms of getting lost in complexity for a bit before you arrive at a simple answer?
Yeah, it happens a lot to me too, that I sometimes feel overwhelmed by some specific thing that I'm not understanding why it happens, or yeah. But I feel like I don't know if it's necessary to first go into the complex. I feel like the way to go should be the opposite. Try to understand the most basic things, but most important things about poker and about the approach to poker you should have. That's why I think having the proper guidance is so important. And move your way up from there, not the way around. I feel like, yeah, trying to overcomplicate things at the start is not going to work out very well.
I like that. I think the mind often steers towards complexity as a way to feel like it's smart, solving problems, whereas simple feels like, it can't be that easy. I can't do the simple stuff because everyone would do it and I won't get ahead. And often ambitious people in particular fall victim of making things very complicated to make them feel like they're getting ahead, when in reality they're just running around in circles, chasing their own tail sort of thing. So yeah, I like that. Trying to start with simplicity.
And there's so many ways to approach poker. And for some people, some things will work better, like going super deep into GTO at first. For some people, maybe it's a great idea. Some players will never be able to grasp 10% of what's going on, and they should probably go a different approach with poker. They can still, I think there's room for a lot of different ways of thinking and different minds and how to approach poker. But you have to know and you have to understand which one fits you. And yeah, some of them will maybe not take you too far, or you'll have to start from that place and then add some other important things that high stakes players do and understand. But at mid stakes, or like, yeah, to get to mid stakes, you can still get away with a lot of different ways of thinking. No need to just put your game in just one box and just have to stay there.
You mentioned the importance of understanding what works for you. If you do know what works for you, do you feel like a player should align with a coach that has a similar philosophy, or go the inverse? And maybe your approach, where you've learned from different, almost like contradictory approaches, that gives you a bit more nuance to your game. Because I think it's, when you're trying to learn, it's very easy to gravitate towards your way of doing stuff. Yeah, I'm just curious to know for yourself, do you feel like there's benefits in aligning with just one philosophy at some point, or maybe with coaches or other people who think differently, who maybe stress your ideas, who push back on how you think a bit more?
I think the main guidance for you should be the way that you think about poker. Like, some people are like a lot more intuitive about the game and should maybe go more about maybe the Spanish approach, trying to think more things logically, and they're not so good with like understanding the solvers, which maybe it's contradictory, but yeah. And some people work very well with solvers. Then some people are good with working with certain protocols on how to play, like they prefer to go with memory on how to do certain stuff. I feel like you should try to find your own way with the right guidance. But yeah, at first it's hard to know which kind of mind you have for poker, which approach to go with. So be open to trying out different styles for sure.
I think that's important as well, to experiment with different approaches, different styles, till you find the way that you learn best and that resonates with you. And it's the same with everything in life. It's really hard to arrive at the thing that works for you at the first time. There's often a lot of experimenting in different approaches. So you're like, actually this approach seems to resonate with me. And it feels like for you, like having one approach or one way of thinking is beneficial, and then adding layers on top in terms of like different kind of nuances and different styles that can push against that. All right, so looking ahead for you, what motivates you right now, and what goals are you still chasing in poker? You've climbed up the mountains. What's still left to achieve?
I feel like, yeah, in terms of stakes, it's just to stay in shape, to be able to show up at the high stakes. And it's my main goal is to keep the motivation and stay in the game for a long time, and to actually make a big difference on my results and my independence that I could generate by having a good results. So yeah, I'm trying not to go too crazy about, just this is it, I made it. I really don't think I did. It was getting to the higher stakes is a big achievement, but I feel like that's nothing compared to being able to stay in the game for a long time and to just actually make a difference. I'm still kind of new to this world in some sense. I see guys that have 15-year careers in cash games and they're still going and they're still making pretty good money. I don't necessarily think I need or I want to play for 15 or 20 years, but I do want to make it count and to make a big difference economically. So I feel like I still have a long way to go and try to enjoy the process, because if not, then definitely the goal is not gonna be achieved.
Getting to the top was the first challenge. Staying at the top becomes the next one. Great stuff. And yeah, it feels like for you, you've done so well to get to where you are. And I love your balanced approach of professionalism, trying to align with your vision and not overextend yourself, but also be pushing yourself. It's been a really good conversation for myself and also the audience, I'm sure. So for you, what would you like the main takeaway for any listeners to our conversation today to take away from our conversation?
Yeah, just try to be professional overall would be my advice. Focus on off poker stuff too. And don't try to rush into things. Just take your time, find your way, and yeah, try to enjoy it also.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. It was great.
All right. Thank you a lot, Mr. Agustín, for dropping this wisdom. I think I straight away said to Adam, okay, well, that was a masterclass in how to be a poker professional. Adam, any main takeaways here?
Yeah, watch it back and take notes will be the main thing. But yeah, it's so many things that are so good about his approach to poker, and his mindset overall is so elite. And I think perspective was a skill that I was seeing him use over and over. Ability to reframe stuff, zoom out, see things in the right context, not get overly overwhelmed through negative results, bad patches. And every poker player is going to go through periods where results just don't align. You're not getting good results, and how you deal with that's really important. A very practical tool that he mentioned is when he's not doing well results-wise, he looks at his lifetime results, zooms out, looks at a nice pretty graph, gets himself into kind of context of, actually, I'm an okay player, I don't suck at this game. And I think often with our lens of life, we zoom in. we zoom in on the short term, we zoom in on the losing session, the bad beat, the misplayed hands, and we lose sight of the bigger picture. And perspective is always the skill of seeing the bigger picture, zooming out, giving yourself longer to get good results. Another thing that came up a lot was risk to reward. He seems very calculated in terms of how he aligns his game selection, his shot taking. And alongside that, he has a very big acceptance of outcomes. I think I wrote down at one point, he wrote down, whatever happens, happens. And that was his way of saying when he took the NL40K, whatever happens, happens, because he's so comfortable with the risk he's taken, the reward that's available, but it's out of his control. So if he loses 3-4 buy-ins, he's okay with that because he accepts the negative side of that. So really being okay when things don't go your way. And he mentioned that as well in terms of one of the lessons he's learned from poker is the ability to not worry about things out of your control, to think of things in seasons or in periods of time that pass. And it's really important to remind ourselves that no matter what period you're going through, it's not going to last forever. I think if we're looking at the challenges of being a poker player, it's not when you're crushing. It's not when you're on the big heater, unless you've got sort of winning tilt or winning performance drop-offs related to winning. Most of the players struggle with the losing side when things aren't going well. So I think this was a really good kind of masterclass on how to deal with adversity by not getting overly attached to results and really accepting anything that goes against you, realizing you're going to be able to go for this patch. And then just being a professional, as you mentioned, kind of a masterclass being a professional, like how to show up in the right way, how to show up as a high performer. And the good news is he doesn't do anything special. He's not like ice baths and infrared saunas and all these kind of crazy biohacking stuff. He's just showing up as a professional every day. He's just studying every day. He's sleeping 9 hours. He's approaching his grinds like a high performer. He's not grinding super long hours. He's grinding generally 2 hours, 1.5 hour sessions, and occasionally goes a bit further. And he shows up, plays his 3 sessions a day, done, clocks off. If he doesn't feel like playing or he's not in a good space, he'll speak with friends or do other things outside of poker, then come back at it again. And just that simplicity, I think, is well, I talked about for a poker player who's ambitious, who maybe overcomplicates stuff. He was just saying, like, make it simple. Like, don't wait to get to simplicity. I kind of challenged him, did his complexity come first, then simplicity? He was like, no, make it simple straight away. Like, don't go for complexity to get it simple, just start simple. And I think a lot of lessons can be learned in terms of how to approach poker as a professional in a simple way. That's very relatable, very achievable. And anyone listening to this can do a lot of the stuff he's doing. The main thing is consistency over time. And that leads to his kind of longevity approach where getting to the top's one thing, but staying there is another. But yeah, I really, really love this conversation. I think there's so many amazing takeaways. Hopefully the audience love this as well and can go back and really take some notes. How about yourself, Rene? What was the main takeaways for you?
Yeah, it's funny that he said that from a technical perspective, especially with some right guidance and the knowledge out there, getting to 500 NL, 1K NL, it's very doable. But then he said to go beyond that, it's all in the mental. And then he said, then it's about having the strength to lose. I really love that one. And then later, actually, we added then, and the courage to win, right? Which was that he actually put it himself out there and took the risks, right? He didn't settle for like a steady paycheck at mid-stakes. No, he literally took the courage and shot at higher stakes. So yeah, amazing stuff. Another thing that he said all the way to the end that I thought was very ironic that I immediately pointed out, he said, don't rush. It's like, wow, a lot of people trying to rush and get there sooner. He literally said, don't rush, and he's one of the fastest risers that we have ever had on because he's like, yeah, just steady Eddie every day, show up, don't do anything too out of the ordinary, just manage yourself well. I think that's a very important one. You covered already a lot of mindset qualities that he has. Aligning expectation was another one. I feel, and like he said, he spent a lot of time in variance calculator. He really understands that, so he doesn't freak out if he goes on a 20 buy and downswing. It's like, oh, yeah, well, that was expected, right? Oh, that's variance. So he doesn't there's no room for the narrative because, he aligned expectations. He kind of knew that it could happen. Another thing that was very important that stood out was the environment, right? That I think that also came with the losses. He said, you don't have to suffer alone. You can talk to people, you hear with people, and also you can then relate to people. That also helps you, not having to do this alone and keeping your head in the right place. Also, in terms of environment, they said, yeah, I saw other people do the same, right? Reach high stakes, play high stakes. So then it becomes, you have proof of concept, right? It becomes very attainable. It's not something alien. So that's also, he kind of lifted on the journey of others, and he got confidence from that as well. Also, his confidence is not just, okay, I have confidence in myself. It's backed up in a lot of knowledge,
right? He was very specific. He knew where the EV came from. Very much awareness around what the win rate expectations are, what the rake is. So he doesn't put himself in games where, you know, he doesn't have a high win rate. Also in terms of how he came in prepared. I remember a long time ago that we did the podcast with George, right? One of the BitB founders, coaches. He also said, where I always know how the EV flows to me, where the EV is coming from. And he kind of quoted that exact the same thing, that he mentioned game plans, right? He knows what fish are going to do. So he, you know, this confidence, he has the right to be confident with the work that he also does off the tables. He mentioned also in terms from a strategical perspective, he mentioned that he had two big influences, kind of the Spanish camp with his first coach, the Argentinian coach, and then later the bit beat guys. And I asked him, okay, what would you teach a bit beat guy, right? And then he said, well, I'll show him that people have leaks, stats, that they have to look outwards, that, you know, these guys have leaks that we can start to attack. And then I asked him, okay, what do you tell the Spanish guy? And he said, you don't have to make up everything in the fly. You can play from like a strategical framework in terms of, okay, in theory, the sizings that are now a thing, I can use this, and then within that sizing scheme, you can adjust your frequency and you can exploit from that. I also pointed out one more thing here towards the end. I think it's very easy to listen to this podcast and sort of be like, well, this is all stuff that I've heard before, right? I know this. But do you really know it? Like, he knows it, and part of the definition of knowing that you're also consistently practicing it. I feel like a lot of people will listen to this, and to some degree, I think I'm guilty of that as well, that you're listening and that makes sense, but we don't know it because we don't practice it every day. So it's more that you're familiar with these concepts. But reflecting on it, do you really, are you showing up as consistently and putting everything in practice just the way Agustín did? Probably not. And, you know, it's like in a steady rise rate, it's very easy to say, okay, you know, luck went this way. But he said also, he had many downswings, and he said he couldn't recall any shot working out straight away, right? It's, again, all how he framed it. And yeah, he didn't have a bad stretch of cards spiral into a huge downswing, right? Or he didn't have a failed shot freeze him completely from taking shots again. So yeah, Mindset Masterclass. Thank you very much, Agustín. I would highly encourage watching, listening back, and try to kind of write down all the mindset and all the definitions of professionalism that you can find. I think it's a great roadmap for, you know, what it takes to be a successful high-stakes poker player. So yeah, thanks again, Agustín. I want to thank Adam for co-hosting this podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you like this episode just as much as we did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I want to shout out to our sponsors, Hand to Note, SnapNDA. Go check them out, and I will see you guys in the next episode.